Hi, I'm David Pickerell, the founder and CEO of GigSafe, and you're watching the Last to First podcast.
All right, Last to First family, we are back with episode 2 of our mini-series with David Pickerell and GigSafe. And this episode, we're going to get a little deeper into how GigSafe is helping clients and drivers save money through insurance and some of the other products and benefits that you can realize when you are a client and working with a third-party administrator like a GigSafe. So, David, welcome back to episode 2.
Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for being here. All right, so we ended the first episode just you started to tease us a little bit with some of the things you guys are doing, other products outside the compliance piece. You mentioned earlier in the first episode also that your initial hypothesis was thinking people would be most interested in this onboarding piece, keeping them inside the sandbox. Yep. But you learned there's other things that they're interested in. You mentioned some of the technology stuff before, but insurance, right? Yep. Obviously, I'm in insurance. We've talked about insurance a couple of times. What other things, what products you see that drivers or companies need to have, and where does GigSafe want to play in that arena?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say we sort of stumbled into insurance. I think
it's a tricky world.
It is a tricky world, right?
It's a tricky world.
I stumbled into it and learned a lot of things the hard way, right?
Yeah,
but really, our philosophy is we just want to solve the problems that our customers have. Right, so we thought that first that would just be the third 3PA, and then we heard growing companies need a faster way to onboard, and growing companies need a faster way and better way to pay and manage that cash flow. Mm-hmm. And what we saw, we built out a bunch of these credentialing because they were saying drivers are dropping off by going to get training somewhere else or credentials somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And the thing I kept hearing, 80% of the time when I asked what is a problem you care about, is the damn insurance rates are going up 30% every year. Right? So that's really sort of how I first got aware of H&O, commercial auto, driver level, all of that sort of world, basically, right? So I just kept hearing the rates keep going up. So I was like, this seems to be a big problem for our customers. Let me go looking, right? Yeah. So I actually think you're probably one of the first folks I called, right? So I sort of maybe made a mistake, and this is advice to other folks out there, which is I showed up and just started talking to everybody, right? Right? I'm sort of naive. I just want to learn, so I just called everybody I could.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, why is insurance so damn expensive?
Yeah, you're digging in.
But what I learned is insurance is very complicated, and there's sort of multiple different folks in the value chain on purpose, basically, right? Because you have the market, you have the wholesale market, you have the broker, and next thing you know, I had folks mad at me, right? They're being like, you shouldn't just be talking to everybody. There's a set of rules, right? I'm like, okay.
And I made these same mistakes too. We had our conversation about it, but I did the same thing. I had no idea that this value chain existed, and so I was jumping around too, just trying to solve a problem. And you start getting these phone calls like, wait, you're not. Not going the right pecking order. I'm like, what is the pecking order about? So it is it's very bureaucratic, I would say in some ways, but it is intentionally designed to ensure that the risk is appropriately applied to the right exposure.
And I think I also then talked to one of my best friends in town here in Austin, and strangely one of my best friends is a personal injury attorney.
Okay.
And he works for Thomas J. Henry. Which
if you've ever been in Texas, you'll see billboards every maybe couple miles. Thomas J. Henry. Stay away from that guy.
He's everywhere. I've heard he also single-handedly dictates the commercial auto rates in Texas.
I could believe that.
But what I learned from my friend is sort of crazy. He's one of 200 lawyers there. And every lawyer has 150 to 200 cases at any given point.
Wow.
So Thomas J. Henry is suing thousands of people at any given point, almost primarily on commercial auto, trucking, and H&O. And he said basically what they really look for is when there is a lack of compliance. So if the driver's license is expired, they don't have the right credential to be able to do that delivery, that's when they're happy. That's when they're excited, right? Because he's like, that takes $1 million case to a $20 million case, right? Then Thomas J. Henry famously threw like an $8 million birthday party for himself and a $6 million birthday party for his daughter. Give you a sense for how much money this guy makes suing it. That's because he's excited. He's like, I can go sue for $20 million. I get my 50% of it, and I can throw a birthday party, right? But I think really where what that ties into is I think what we thought was, hey, if our system can demonstrate continuous compliance, especially that's when we decided to really lean into the TMS integration side of things.
Yeah.
Can our customers use that to get better insurance policies, basically? How do you think about that? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge because you think about again, going from my experience, there's even when you have the insurance in place, there's gaps in the compliance piece, right? So for example, we had a situation just probably 10 years ago. We had a driver who had provided us with insurance, and unfortunately got into an accident. And when the accident occurred, he told us he had the insurance in place, and we called the insurance, and there is no active insurance in place. And so now we're dealing with a much larger claim. You have a victim who's got an attorney involved, and now they're at our doorstep, and they're like, well, who's going to pay this?
Yeah.
Right? And we thought that the driver's insurance would cover it, but lo and behold, he never paid the premium. We had no idea. We were checking every month, but just that gap, the timing, it was a gap. And so he slipped right through the crack. And so that put us, square in the middle of a potential serious situation that we were able to resolve. But that could have led to, ultimately shutting down the business, because you get a large misclassification claim as a result of that. And, it's
so I think that's a big one, right? Is like making sure the driver has the right coverage. Mm-hmm. Another one too is also just even some of the basics. So we want to talk to the insurance company. Is like, was the driver actually on your job at the point of that claim?
Yeah.
Basically, right? The driver also just even the very basics, right? So I was sort of surprised when we went and talked to an insurance market, showed them the system, and they're just like, this is great. Most of the folks we insured, we don't even know if this stuff is up to date, basically, right?
Yeah.
So from my perspective, it seemed very simple. It's just like, can we make sure the driver's on the job when there's an accident? Can we make sure all their documents are up to date? But doing that actually turns out helps the insurance company reduce their risk. And what we're trying to work on is to say, can that then mean that you save money on your insurance?
Yeah.
Right.
And let me touch on that, because I want to jump back, because one of the first things I did when I jumped in the insurance world was speak to a bunch of carriers and underwriters. And I was like you, when you're just talking to everyone, I was talking to any carrier I could to figure out why are you looking at final mile as such a high risk category?
Yeah.
What is happening out there that I'm not seeing? Because my last year in business, my insurance went up 33%, and we had a clean year. I couldn't understand it. So the answer I got back from these underwriters, summarizing here, was basically two things. One, lack of regulation in your industry. Like final mile, traditional final mile, there's no DOT typically doesn't really regulate us, because most of our vehicles are under 10,000 GVWs. We don't fall within the same state laws that came about from Uber and Lyft and the rideshare food delivery, where their state laws are mandating, these companies have to provide certain insurances to them. So there's no regulations. And then visibility. Right? We have hundreds. In my case, I had 125 drivers. There's companies with thousands of drivers out there, and they can't tell you really much about how these drivers perform. So when you have an insurance company who is basically taking a risk on insuring his fleet, but there's no visibility, there's no way for you to determine who's good, who's bad, they get really antsy about that.
Also, I mean, on top of that, like, you're getting bucketed with a bunch of folks who don't run a tight ship.
100%.
Right? So it's like there are folks who play it fast and loose, and you're also paying for them. Right?
100%. Yeah. It's a challenge. And so you guys were able to offer some insurance solutions and put it in a way where it's integrated into the overall solution, so you close those gaps.
So we started off really identifying two things that our early customers cared about: occupational accident insurance and hired and non-owned auto. And we were able to get integrated solutions that are integrated as part of the software that drivers and customers can just opt into really simply, right? So there's no minimum, no down payment. It's completely pay as you go. It's deducted from revenue or driver payments. Basically, we just make it real easy. And we did a good job where we were able to convince a bunch of, specifically our catering and other type customers, that we could represent them as a group. We could go to a market. We could get a policy at a price that they themselves would not be able to get themselves.
Right. Managing independent contractors and gig workers is tough. Between onboarding, compliance, insurance, and payments, it's a lot to handle. And one mistake can put your entire business in jeopardy. That's where GigSafe comes in. Your all-in-one solution for managing independent contractors and gig workers, seamlessly and cost-effectively. Get drivers onboarded in days, not weeks. Automate compliance and save up to 40% on insurance. Visit gigsafe.com and give them the L2F discount code to get 10% off your first month's invoice. Now back to Last of First.
And, it's been quite nice, right? We have a good policy that people sign up to. What I've learned, though, as we started to work with larger and larger customers, is insurance can be very specific. So, it's great that this H&O policy works for Red Wagon, one of our customers, right? Or it's great that it works for Logiscal that does meal kit deliveries.
Yeah.
What happens when there's scheduled autos? What happens when I do have a couple trucks larger, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's sort of where we are now in sort of our insurance journey, is realizing that we designed a nice policy and it works for some folks, but it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? I think what we're doing now is trying to work with smart folks like you and basically say, hey, can we get help finding these customers the right policies? And together, can we go convince the markets that it's not regulated, but we have people opting into this compliance system.
Yeah.
We're, as a group, self-regulating this group. Can we go get good rates?
Yeah.
Basically, right?
And that's the key. That's what we, at the recent conference, we had a panel where we were talking about that. Some other, myself and some other insurance brokers or colleagues in the industry, we're talking about how do we self-impose, regulations or just compliance, rules and regs so that we are more attractive to these insurance markets. Because, this now you need deep into it. There's only a handful, if that really have an appetite for kind of what we do, this we provide to our clients.
Yep.
And, it has to be resolved because, final mile, last mile, the gig world has continued to grow and evolve. Yep. And I don't see this thing slowing down at any point. And so we've got to figure out a way to kind of do that. One of the best ways to do that is to get yourself into one of these solutions where you can go in there and then you're going to not only just protect yourself, your business, have more peace of mind and sleep better at night, but for the larger industry, you're also helping to reshape and reform where it's now looked at an industry that's saying, okay, we're doing the things we need to do. If you look at what trucking did with the ELD mandates, 10 years ago, right? The electronic logging devices. When those things first came out, and I was one of them, we were kicking and screaming like, who wants to put all this stuff? This big brother technology coming, these trucks. Yeah. You fast forward now, you talk to any trucking company, 95%, maybe 99% are automatically have telematics in the vehicles, have ELDs, total shift. And because they've seen some improvement, not just from safety, but also from the insurance. Yep. So that's the name of the game.
Yep. And that's a bit of like, how can we just get people to opt in as a group and get the insurance market to basically say, hey, you're looking at this big risky pool, right, of just broad 1099. Yeah. We just have this little group here, and this group is great. Can you just price this group at this group's risk? Yeah. Not at this group's risk. Yeah. Right.
And do you find something? I remember having conversations with carriers, and they say, "Oh, you guys are like," when I'll explain kind of what we do. "Oh, you guys are like Amazon DSP." Like, "Oh no, we're not like that at all. Really, we drivers that are mostly operating their own vehicles. Different type of work we're doing. Oh, you guys are most like gig workers." I'm like, well, no, not really. We're not really gig either. We're kind of in a different box. Do you see a difference in how a gig worker, from a compliance standpoint, a gig worker versus a final mile driver versus a trucker or something like that? Is there any difference in how they're treated and managed in the platform?
From our perspective, it really is just about the different onboarding modules and the different credentials, right? So I think the base system was built to onboard gig workers, right? Mm-hmm. But from our perspective, I call them sort of different onboarding modules, right? Yeah. And we just listen to what our customers want and we can layer that in. So an example I give is we heard from customers that STA forms were painful. Mm-hmm. So we had a customer who were onboarding drivers and a driver took like 7 weeks to onboard. Yeah. And we're like,
STA form, security threat assessment. So if drivers are if you're doing any type of air freight, picking up from the airport, tenders in the airport, the driver needs to be serviced with that. Yeah. It takes a long time to that.
It can if you get it wrong, right? So their form is very specific, sort of pedantic, right? They're sort of like, you need to fill out everywhere you've lived in the last couple of years. And if you leave a day out in between, it goes to a 6-week review. Yeah. And then it gets kicked back. So we're like, this is crazy. Like, we can build an onboarding module that is almost like TurboTax. We ask the right questions, it fills in the right things, and there you go. Yeah. Right? So I really view that we have a very strong system where we were able to build this STA form automator in like 3 hours, right? So I really view that as we're just doing this customer by different requests, right? So same thing, HIPAA. We were learning that folks were kicking people out to a HIPAA training on another website. They would have to enter a code, get the training, take the PDF, come back and enter it into the system. Guess what? You lose drivers on the onboarding. So we help with that. Yeah. But really from my perspective, then you start to layer in DOT numbers, motor carrier numbers, all sorts of things. But to me, actually, The system's built to handle it all, right? So it's just whatever the specific requirements are. We now handle stuff all the way up to a 26K box truck. We haven't crossed that line.
Right. And maybe we episode 2 on just talking about, and maybe you can kind of tease a little bit of where the future is going. I know we'll talk about that in the next episode. But when you look at what you've built, right? So you've been at it for a little over a couple of years now. Truly,
the Para 4 or 5 years, GigSafe is 14 months old.
Okay. Yep. So it's early in the game, but you have a lot of experience that you've. When you look at where we're going. Yeah. And you're talking about compliance, we're talking about insurance, we're talking about the ways to close these gaps into the system that we're building here. Where do you see the biggest pain points that your clients are experiencing today that you're looking to solve for tomorrow?
That's a good question. Yeah, on my end, a couple things, right? So I think folks want to. We got this ask. Actually, yesterday I was in an Atlanta meeting with a prospective customer, and he's like, "Can you build me HubSpot for my drivers?" So I want to be able to message them through your system. I want to be able to offer them incentives through the system. I want to be able to look up on every interaction I've had with a driver in the system and see their stats and pull the TMS data and put it into their profile. So that was a pretty interesting one to me. I was let me get back to you.
Yeah.
Beyond that, there's a whole world of sort of master contractor, subcontractor, and carrier onboarding, right? So as we started to work with larger customers, you probably saw this a lot, is they work with masters, and a lot of time they'll work with another carrier, right? So they'll get a shipper come in and say, "Hey, I got this contract in 5 states. They're like, I can handle 4 of them, but I need my friend to do the other state."
Sure.
And what we're hearing is folks now, a lot of this was done on Excel or on a piece of paper, being like, I trust Jason's company and we're
Health
good.
insurance, right?
Yeah. But what we're hearing more from folks is that they want to know who the master contractors and the subcontractors are, and they also need to maintain continuous compliance on the carriers that they also work together on jobs on, basically.
To make sure they have all their credentials and certifications to support.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that's sort of a big part of it. And I think, as you said earlier, good drivers are gold. So there's a lot of requests around better driver benefits. Can you do stuff that really helps them?
Yeah.
And I think that's something I'm also excited to work on over time. It's like I had a lot of experience. We put a lot of different benefits in front of the 380,000 para drivers. And what I learned is that the stuff you think that they will like isn't necessarily what folks like. So what we found the most popular was stuff that just saved them money. So can you get discounts on a T-Mobile or Verizon plan? Can you get a really discounted towing? Can you get discounts on gas? Weirdly, the second most requested thing, we sent a survey out to all the workers on Para, was, can you get me discounts at 7-Eleven? So we didn't realize this, but a lot of the folks were just eating
quick coffees or
coffees
sandwiches.
and hot dogs at 7-Eleven.
Yeah, while they're filling up,
So that was sort of shocking to me, but we had 14,000 folks be like, get me discounts at 7-Eleven, right? But I think there's a whole world of that sort of stuff I'm excited to roll out. So.
Well, look, great to episode 2 of our mini-series. We're here with David Pickerell with GigSafe. Come back, stay with us. Episode 3, we're going to get into the future, where the puck is going. Give us a little teaser there. We're going to get more into the details and get some. We'll get some client success stories. Want to hear exactly where the solutions have been applied and how they have been successful. So, David, thanks for episode 2.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back episode 3, last and first, next time. Peace.